I think of mindfulness practice and Zen practice, in a way, it's the world of non-duality, not being so convinced that we think we know what this world actually is.
Hmm.
Practices, I'd say, like selflessness and timelessness, effortlessness,
Hmm.
seeing how, I guess, the experience of the mystery and miraculousness of, being alive, being here of our consciousness, being a human being
Hmm.
for a short time on this planet, being able to live that, live that sense of sacredness and appreciation.
Mark, thanks so much for joining me on the Mark Divine Show. Super stoked to have you here today.
A pleasure to be here with you, Mark.
Yeah, so it's always a great thrill of mine to speak to Zen practitioners because, as my listeners know, that's kind of where it all started with me. And what set me on my path was actually Zen meditation, studying under a martial arts grandmaster named Nakamura. And as a 21-year-old kid, blowing my brain wide open. So pretty awesome. So can we start this thing just by giving us a sense of like who you are? What was your origin story? Where'd you grow up? What was that like with your parents and, the kind of early formative years?
Yeah. I grew up in a small town in central New Jersey.
No kidding. Okay. Which exit?
Exit 135. I kind of brag that from my house as a child, I could hear the parkway and smell the turnpike.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness. I know exactly what
but
you're talking about.
it's actually kind of a sweet, small, quiet suburban town. My father was an electrician. My mother was a secretary. I feel like I grew up in bowling alleys and golf courses. I loved sports. I played a lot of baseball and football on the
Did you?
streets in that little town, and then threw myself into wrestling in high school. I was captain of my high school wrestling team. Physical activities was always really, really important to me. It was at Rutgers that discovering a whole new group of human beings, broadening my world, being at
Hmm.
college. I had a professor who had been a colleague of Timothy Leary's
Hmm.
at Harvard and introduced me to LSD as a spiritual practice. That definitely expanded my world.
Hmm.
And also, I discovered a love of reading and learning while in
Hmm.
college. One of my favorite classes was French, German, and Italian literature in translations, where I
Wow.
discovered
Interesting.
Sartre and Camus and
Hmm.
Kafka and discovered meditation and Zen while in college, and at some point decided I wanted to do it and not read about it. And I took
Hmm.
a 1 year leave of absence from Rutgers, walked into the San Francisco Zen Center, and stayed 10 years.
So
Quite
you
literally, yeah.
that's really cool. So you learned about Zen. Do you remember? Was it a book or was it a friend or a professor?
Yeah, it was The Way of Zen by Alan Watts,
Yeah. Okay.
as well as, I think Paul Repp's book and a few others. But
Right.
yeah, there weren't a lot at the time, but
No, that's fascinating. So you went back to finish at Rutgers? I also noticed you have your MBA from one of my alma maters, NYU.
I did. Well, one of the things that a big surprise for me that during my years at the Zen Center, I kept getting asked to take on leadership roles. So I found myself running things and
Right.
leading people, and I guess I was maybe a little before my time in that way. I wondered, why isn't everyone integrating the practices and skills from Zen practice with work and leadership? They
Right.
just seemed like they went together really, really well. And I had this crazy idea. I think that's what I'm going to do with my life. I said, but I don't really know anything about business. I think I need to learn something. I went back and finished my undergraduate degree at Rutgers and went right into New York University Business School.
That's terrific. I was at NYU Stern School of Business in 1985 when I discovered Zen.
I was there then.
Is that right? Fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I was there, 84 to 86.
Yeah. I was 85 to 89. It took me a little longer because I got a master's in accounting, and then I switched over to the MBA program and went to the night. I was in the night program.
Yeah.
So you did this after you left the San Francisco Zen Center?
Okay. I did.
So let me go back to that. By the way, I want to make a comment. I want to come back to like, why aren't more CEOs integrating? I don't, I think generally, at least for our era, if you were inclined towards Zen, then you were generally oriented away from business. So it was a rare person like you or even me to kind of bring stuff like this into the business world. But it's becoming much more common, as you know. Let me just frame it up this way. I've been to one monastery 4 times, but I never stayed long. These are like 4-day karate meditation retreats at the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, New York. Mm-hmm. And the head monk was a guy named, I know that's not the title, but you can tell me what the title is, but Renshi or something. I don't really follow the Zen hierarchy much, but his name was Daido.
Mm-hmm. Daido Lori.
Remember that? Yes, Daido.
I knew Daido, yeah.
Did you? He was an incredibly cool, interesting cat. He was former merchant marine, covered in tattoos, chain smoked cigarettes.
And an artist. And
an artist,
teacher, and an artist, yeah.
And extremely insightful. And I found the looking forward to leaving after 4 days each time I went. So I was like, that monastic life wouldn't have suited me. I was much too adventurous, and even though I loved my Zen practice, I didn't want it to be like the center post of everything at that point in my life. So how did you find that? Like, what drew you to it, and what were the challenges? I mean, I went through Navy SEAL training, and I think that Zen training has some similarities.
Yeah.
For the mind, anyways.
Yeah. Well, for the mind and the body, too. I mean, mm-hmm. I think, it's a physical body practice. I loved it, and even a few years ago, I went back and did a 3-month practice period.
Did you? Oh, wow.
And I have to say, the first morning with the 3:40 a.m. wake-up bell, wandering to the meditation hall in the dark, thinking, what was I thinking?
This is going to be a long 3 months, you're thinking, right?
But I have to say, partly, it's training in noticing our resistance and letting it go.
Right.
And yeah, after my what the hell was I doing, I just completely enjoyed what a beautiful, privileged thing to be able to do, just to do a lot of meditation. And also there's a incredible intimacy of living in community that way, especially like this was in a, Tassajara, which is a remote mountain valley. So also, spectacularly beautiful living in nature in that way, mm-hmm. Surrounded by mountains, and the simplicity of it, and the ritual aspect. Every meal is a ritual. Mm-hmm. And
every day
just
is
being
a
able
ritual.
to throw myself into that practice, I feel like I'm quite healthy and fit, and didn't struggle as much with a lot of people with the physical part of it. I enjoy sitting a lot.
Yeah, people don't really appreciate how hard sitting, especially on the Zazen bench, with an upright posture, alert. It's challenging, and there were times where you're breaking a sweat, going, "Holy cow!" I mean, I called it concentration camp when I first did it.
Yeah,
it was challenging.
Yeah.
Tell us about the daily ritual. Like, most people aren't familiar with what a day in the life of a Zen monk looks like. Let's walk it through us.
For whatever reason, they like to start early. So start the day with maybe 3 half-hour periods of meditation, with walking, a little bit walking in between each period. Mm-hmm. Maybe 20 or 30 minutes of some chanting and reading from Zen texts, and then a very formal, in the meditation hall, breakfast. People take turns serving each other, but breakfast is very much a ritual.
Those weren't silent periods, were they, the meals?
So there's silence up until noon. There's breakfast, and then there's an hour of studying together in a room, silent study. Often there'd be a lecture in the morning. Someone would give a talk. There'd be maybe a little bit more meditation in the morning. Lunch, and then usually all afternoon was working all afternoon. Mm-hmm.
Working on, at the monastery, like gardening.
You're working in the kitchen or garden, shop, taking care of, things.
Wax on, wax off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then bath and exercise time in the afternoon, dinner, some kind of social time every evening after dinner was people would kind of quiet, hanging out and talking, hang out with people, and period or two of meditation at night and to bed early, and that was pretty much, the rhythm was 5 days on and then 1 day off.
And the off day, you get to go into town or do whatever.
No. This was you don't leave.
You don't leave at all.
No, 90 days for 90 days. You don't
for
leave.
90 days. Yeah. Okay. But when you were there for 10 years, did you do these 90-day cycles and then take a break, or?
Yeah. 90-day cycles. Summertime was guest season where people opened up and people would come in, leave at various times. But yeah, I think I did. 10 years for me at the Zen Center, half of that time was monastic. Other times, I spent 3 years living at the Zen Center farm in Marin County.
Oh, cool.
Where I was assigned to figure out how to farm with horses.
What fun.
Yeah, that was an amazing 3-year experience. Also kind of like boot camp. I didn't know anything about horses or farming, so
that's cool.
Quite a experience.
So you had some leadership skills and obviously problem solving skills, like learning how to farm with horses and whatnot. But all this time, from what I experienced and what I know about Zen practice, your mind is it's clarified, purified, strengthened, your concentration strengthened, and you're broadening your kind of awareness or contextual awareness. You'll be able to perceive more. I want to talk about two things. One is kind of the distinction between the concentration of Zen and the mindfulness, because they're two distinct practices, and what they do to you or how they kind of show up in terms of brain training. And then I would love to kind of look at how these skills helped you as a leader and an entrepreneur, and how they might help other leaders. And there's a lot there, but let's start out with the concentration of mindfulness and also compassion, because we have, there's really 3 different training kind of paths there. And ideally we bring them all together. And it sounds like that's what you've been able to do.
Zen practice in some way really emphasizes just quiet sitting, but I'd say sitting as a place to become more and more comfortable with one's own discomfort, getting to know fear and discomfort really, really well. There's a core teaching from one of the early Zen teachers, this fellow named Dogen from the 13th century, and he says, to study the way is to study the self, and to study the self is to go beyond the self.
Right.
Concentration is a piece of it in terms of being able to work with and quiet the mind some, so that we're not always the monkey mind isn't taking over all the time. So that's kind of simple, training the mind to be a bit more quiet. Mm-hmm. I think of mindfulness practice and Zen practice, in a way, it's the world of non-duality, right? So not being so convinced that we think we know what this world actually is. Mm-hmm. Practices, I'd say, like selflessness and timelessness, effortlessness, seeing how, I guess, the experience of the mystery and miraculousness of being alive, being here of our consciousness, being a human being for a short time on this planet, being able to live that, live that sense of sacredness and appreciation. And what I love, to me, these are all core leadership skills. I mean, there may be other things that leaders need to do as well. The best leaders that I see are ones that can bring this sense of focus, vision, self-awareness, and appreciation as practices are just, I think, core leadership practices and human practices in all our relationships.
And you're seeing more and more recognition of that, post-COVID, and as we accelerate into this VUCA world. And so people are recognizing, the younger generation especially is just going to refuse to work for leaders who don't kind of lead with that open hand, open heart, and, the compassionate authenticity.
Yeah. And I think, I kind of alluded to earlier that I might have been ahead of my time, but now I feel like the world has caught up. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of interest from
Yeah.
many, many, again, whether it's even in the military
Yeah. When I
around.
went through SEAL training, I mean, the military, I mean, yoga, I would have been laughed at. They didn't teach really any of these skills. And I started teaching SEAL trainees back in 2006, teaching them core breathing practices and mindfulness and visualization skills and internal dialogue, controlling your internal dialogue, concentration type practices. And they had extraordinary success with that. So of the SEALs trainees that I worked with, 90% would get through the SEAL training, which is compared to like 85% fail rate for the average. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about average people, but the average SEAL candidate. And so now the SEALs have taken on and are training these kind of Eastern practices at SEAL training, and yoga is very, very common, right? They brought yoga into the SEALs. So it's really, really powerful to see that even in the military, because it will make for a more mindful warrior, which I think we need in our world today, obviously, across the board. Tell us a little bit about, I want to come back a little later to the Zen training again and link it more to leadership, but tell us about the Google program. I think they called it Search Inside Yourself, or SIY.
Yes.
You helped develop that?
I did, yeah.
They were kind of early pioneers too, then it seems like, in this.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this was the vision of an early Google engineer who was a serious meditator, and he thought, how can I scale meditation in the world? And let's start here at Google.
Right.
And I got brought in as well as a neuroscientist, and we really created a program that introduced meditation. We actually called it mindfulness-based emotional intelligence.
Nice.
So we recognized that emotional intelligence was something that leaders and companies seem to really get and understand,
right,
how important emotional intelligence is for leadership.
And there was some research behind it.
Lots of research. And then there was lots of research around meditation,
right,
mindfulness meditation practice, and that the kind of a powerful model of integrating those two practices as a form of leadership training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we, over several years, experimented and designed a program that became the Search Inside Yourself program. Originally, we were doing it in short periods over a 7-week period, and then it kind of morphed into a 2.5-day program. It became crazy popular inside of Google.
That's
yeah,
cool.
Yeah. I think, one of the languages that Google engineers described it as a place where they could take their game faces off.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things we did really well is we created a safe environment where they're outside of the competition and the measurement and where people could just be themselves. We taught things like listening skills. We taught things like how to work with difficult emotions, how to have difficult conversations. So kind of a combination of using the emotional intelligence model of self-awareness, self-management, motivation, empathy, and social skills, and then weaving in meditation practices and listening practices, especially. It used to blow my mind, when we would introduce things like one person speaking and one person listening for 3 minutes for then Google employees to experience how rarely they actually listened or how rarely anyone listened to them. They were not paying people to listen, They were not measuring. Nobody was measuring. How's your listening? It's like, but like, wow. Like,
as you say that, I think all listeners are thinking, wow, that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but 3 minutes of just clamping your mouth shut and being present to listen without processing and judging and default mode networking all over the other person. It's hard work.
Yeah. But I think experiencing the value of it, that not only do you realize that you're not listening, you realize that you're not actually seeing this other human being there. And then you're being seen, and there's an intimacy that comes with 3 minutes of listening. It's like, really, it was life-changing for people.
That's amazing.
And then I think, to layer in, okay, once you've experienced what comes with listening, how do you then bring that into your management and leadership? How do you bring that into your life? And, at the end of day one of these 2-day trainings, I would say, as an experiment tonight, when you go home, if your partner comes to you with a problem, instead of just immediately getting in there and problem solving, experiment by saying, would you like me just to listen? Or would you like to problem solve? And people would come back, especially men, of course, would come back on the morning of day 2 and say, my wife wondered if I'd been abducted by aliens.
Yeah, that's terrific. I'm curious, my experience is that you can only convey so much in a seminar or workshop type setting, and these skills really, just like in the monastery, they need to be practiced. And so within an organization, have you seen communities of practice kind of develop that take these skills into a, hey, we're going to work on these search inside yourself skills together as a team?
Yeah, Google created this whole community,
Nice.
got built around mindfulness practices, and
That's terrific.
there was a while they were also starting to build meditation rooms all throughout the campus.
Did that stop? You
And
said
then
they started, but it doesn't sound like it continued.
They're still doing some search inside yourself programs there. I'm not as close to it as I was. One of the things that really helped was identifying what I think of as internal champions, as the people who were really passionate about this, and then training them
Right.
as teachers. So that was the programs got highly scaled inside of that organization and in other organizations as well through that teacher training model.
Back to the Zen practice, you mentioned that, and I agree with it, sitting in silence, essentially you have to face your resistance. One of my favorite quotes is, the ego is resistance to what is, or resistance to life. And life is what is. So the ego is resistance to life. So you're sitting there and you're going to have physiological resistance because of the discomfort. You're going to have emotional resistance come up, which will be likes and dislikes and desires and fears. So is that the practice, just constantly facing what resistance is in front of you? Or are there various practices? Like when I started Zen, like Nakamura had us actually do a concentration practice. He said, okay, we need to stabilize your minds in order to go to kind of like, this is the crawl before you go to the walk phase.
Right.
And so he had us inhale, exhale, count 1, inhale, exhale, count 2. And the goal was to get to 10, which we could never do. It's all virtually impossible for a beginner. So
yeah, I mean, this, I would say that, I do a lot of meditation teaching in various contexts. And in fact, I once heard a Zen teacher say, if you don't teach people about counting the breath, you're not really giving adequate meditation instructions. So that is a core practice is breath counting, being able to notice your exhales as a way of knowing when you're distracted. You count 1 and your mind is you could keep coming back to 1. That is one really very basic tool, using the breath as an anchor. I think there's still so much research that is going to be done still about meditation practice, and something about, to me, the practice of sitting with others. And I'd be a hard study to do, but I hope someday someone can study the difference that happens in the brain when you're sitting with others versus when you're sitting alone.
I think it is significant. I mean, we've experienced that, right? When I meditate alone, it's a different experience.
Totally. Yeah.
I meditate with others. And also when I lead a meditation, I have the most profound experiences when I lead meditations.
Yes.
You're holding that space and there's that Shaktipat kind of transfer of energy. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. So Mark, I think, I sometimes, one of the comparisons I make is that we know that at night when we sleep, amazing changes are happening. The brain is being rewired. the changes in all of our cells and our bodily systems happen when we sleep. I think something similarly is going on when we meditate.
Mm-hmm.
So when we meditate, we're not sleeping, but we're not doing, right? So we are sincerely going into this state of not doing, of just being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we now see through some of these studies that there literally is some rewiring happening
Mm-hmm.
of our synapses and cells and the gray matter in our brain. But then there's the whatever we're experiencing in that state of quieting the mind, that state of again and again letting go of our comparisons about am I doing it right or wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Am I a success? Or so all of that, loosening that ego stuff,
Right.
and then very consciously bringing that. How am I now when I get up from my meditation cushion, out of my meditation chair? How am I bringing that into my relationships, into my leadership, into everything that I'm doing? One of the things I loved about my time living in the monastery was the meditation hall and the kitchen were literally connected.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I kept getting assigned to work in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And for years I was on the kitchen crew, and then I was the assistant to the head cook, and then I was the head cook for each a year. It was so profound for me that getting up from meditation, changing my clothes, and walking right into the kitchen to work.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
That work practice became really not much different than meditation practice,
Mm-hmm.
but I was chopping vegetables and making soups, putting salads together, and working with people, and then back to the meditation hall. I think this is the great opportunity which people are beginning to get of work as a practice.
Right.
And that if you have a meditation practice and then make work your practice, the opportunity to integrate those two things and how much I can learn in my meditation practice about the things that just bothered me at work, or why did I say that, or why did she do that? And to kind of let all that stew in my sitting practice in a healthy, non-judgmental way, but in a way of understanding. And then again, so this is the beauty, I think, of these two different modes of practice.
Sure. No, I love that. There's so much to unpack there. The Western mind is obviously biased toward doing, toward action. This the training, the conditioning we have. And when we're not doing, we're not being productive, we feel like something's wrong. It's going to catch up to us, right? Mm-hmm. And I agree with 100% with what you say. The beauty of meditation practice is it teaches you that being is just as valuable as doing. And just like the yin-yang symbol, they are hand and glove. And the yin-yang symbol has a little white dot in the black space and a little black dot in the white space, and that represents wei wu wei, what you're talking about, bringing that beingness, that quiet witnessing into your work, into the yang, and then simultaneously being actively alert in your meditation, right? Not being dull and not being checked out, but there's alertness. There's a watching for what's next, until you get closer and closer to that just precise moment of presence. These are extraordinarily valuable skills for leaders, I think, just like you do, because without that, most leaders are just barreling toward burnout these days. They just think they just have to add more and more and more to their to-do lists and accomplishment lists and degree lists and certificate lists and, get things done list, and without taking time to restore and to reflect and to tap into that deep pool of wisdom.
I was just reading about a study that was done, I think fairly recently, of kindergartners, where one group emphasized cognitive skills, reading and math primarily, and another group emphasized attitude, showing initiative, listening, and emotional skills. And then they wanted to see what happened 5 years later it turns out that the emotional skills, the attitude skills were so much more valuable than the cognitive skills. And I think, again, we're now treating our leaders as we should, like kindergartners. And because most people just never had any training. And our society doesn't train people in things like self-awareness or things like compassion, or even, again, coming back to listening. Like, imagine if all of our education, that there was this emphasis on awareness and listening.
Imagine that. Yeah. Yeah, we really are kind of at the kindergarten level, but it's a good place to start, right?
It's a good place to start.
I'm curious, do you think meditation apps have any value, like the guided meditations and mind space, or not,
I do. I think for a lot of people, in fact, I've been joking that meditation apps are the gateway drug to deeper meditation practice. And I think, for a lot of people, they make it accessible. They introduce it to people. I think of them as, I call them the gateway drug because I think that there is something powerful about the practice of just sitting, without any needed ongoing guidance. And there's something really profound, as we've kind of touched on, about sitting with others. I used to hear how people struggling about not being able to sustain a meditation practice. And it was almost always people sitting by themselves. And my suggestion was find a group to sit with, even if it's sitting online.
It works.
You're still, even though I'm online, I'm still a real body
a
here.
satsang will work online for sure. I think it can be equally as powerful, just like they're finding like therapy. I've done EMDR online. It works just as well as in person.
Yes.
Amazing, actually.
Yeah.
We're not separate, right? Just because we have a camera in front of us we're still not separate. So
yeah, my executive coaching practice is now almost all online, and I don't find any problem at all with it. That can still really meet and connect.
I like what you said about the apps. I agree with you. I think an app, I kind of liken it to like a wearable device, like an Oura Ring or Apple iWatch. I don't use them, but I found them useful for about 90 days until I recognized that, I had the intuition and I could actually sense just as well or better than the app, how my sleep was or what my heart rate was. And maybe that's because I've been meditating for so long, so that wearable it was interesting, but it wasn't as useful. But my point is that for people who are new to meditation and need guidance or just need something to hook their mind to sit down and listen to a guided meditation or guided visualization, it really begins to channel their mental energy. It does some of the concentration work for you, blocks out some of the chatter, But eventually, I think it can be a hindrance. Just think of like a wearable eventually will be a hindrance. You want to be able to develop the sensitivity to know that stuff yourself.
Yeah. I've actually, I've done quite a few and recorded quite a few guided meditations, and mine are, I think of them almost as, mini Dharma talks. They're useful in that they are providing a way to get people to stop. Also, they're kind of an introduction to the basic mindset, the basic approach of what meditation is. I think of it as training wheels. Training wheels are hugely important to learn, but then to be able to step out of that and just be with your mind.
Talk to us about the difference between effort and surrender when it comes to your practice and meditation in general.
Yeah, I love the practice of effort and effortlessness. It's a beautiful field to play in, right? It's a little counterintuitive, right? The effort of effort, it takes some effort
to get to the effortlessness.
To the effortlessness.
It does.
But it's well worth it, right? And it's especially, I think, the practice of noticing anything that is extra effort, right? Noticing extra effort, really bringing
because that's where the resistance is, right?
Yeah. Noticing the resistance. I think of people who feel a sense of powerlessness in their work. It's a terrible place. I don't like my work. What's your role in that? What do you mean you don't like, are you a victim here, or like, Now there are really difficult toxic workplaces, but they're relatively rare. It's mostly noticing our attitudes, noticing our resistance. What would it take to enjoy your work? What would it take to love your work? And again, it's playing, I think, with that. What effort are you making in your work that is not useful? That's going it's like, how much of it is just plain old resistance?
Right.
How much of it is plain old some habit of powerlessness?
Right.
So
I love
these
that.
these are interesting.
Yeah, it helps the practice of shedding, right? The conceptual models or mental models, what you're talking about, like the things you're hanging on to, the stories you're telling, the biases. When you sit, you begin to see them as just the conceptualizations or the particularizations, as Dr. David Hawkins would call it. It's like, and those are all constructed. Those are the ego's attempt to try to make meaning, usually through a long period of traumatizing childhood events and, a very confusing world. And we bring those into our workplaces and our relationships, and they become our projections. And so everything is going to form itself to those shapes that you have, because we create the world that we live in. And that's what you're talking about. So it takes effort to begin to push against the resistance of breaking down those mental models to allow something else to emerge. So that's the work. When those models, when those conceptualizations begin to fall off, which can only happen through stillness and through deep investigation, that self-inquiry, then what emerges is more truth and more wisdom and more love.
And Mark, this is the perfect segue to at least mention my book.
Yeah, I want to talk. We got time.
That's okay. The book is called Finding Clarity, and one of the chapters is called Drop the Story.
I love it. Yeah.
But again, it's easy to say, the previous chapters are Be Curious, Not Furious, and the practice of listening deeply. So I think that curiosity and that listening are necessary practices for being able to be aware of, again, the story, the truths that we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're capable of, what we're not capable of, our attitudes. So it's a profoundly different approach. And, the book is really wrapped around what I call compassionate accountability.
Yeah. I read that in your bio, but what does that mean to you? Passionate accountability.
Yeah, so this is I think one of the core tensions in the business world of bringing these practices into the business world is that in the world of work, you got to get stuff done.
Right.
Performance matters. Results matter in the business world. They might not matter as much, on the sitting cushion, but in that workplace, results matter. And at the same time, compassion matters, and being able to work with heart and developing a workplace that has trust instead of cynicism is essential for workplaces to be effective. So this, I think, is one of the ongoing tensions between how do we bring in both of these in the workplace? How do we create a culture, an environment that is very effective and accountable and aligned, and at the same time build a culture of trust and even a culture of love.
Right.
This is hard. It takes real commitment and practice and skill in both of these fields of mindfulness and awareness, as well as in leadership and the skill of that are involved in the work environment.
It's interesting and kind of surprising to me, but as you were describing that, I was thinking back to my Navy SEAL team days, right? When I was on a platoon, or in a platoon, and we had that intimate working relationship with 13 or 14 other individuals who are deeply, passionately committed to their craft as well as to mastering themselves. And we had those qualities, right? We had intense accountability, both to our personal work of, making sure that we show up our best every day and do the training, but also to the mission and the team skills and our ability to get done. But also that was combined with deep compassion and love for each other, to the extent that we're willing to lay our lives down for each other. So it's an incredible model. Most people wouldn't think of a military special ops unit to have compassionate accountability, but they definitely do.
Yeah, no, totally. My wife has done a lot of work with veterans.
Actually,
I'm getting ready to do a retreat for a group of wildland firefighters.
oh, good for you.
So I think those environments, like SEALs, military, fire, like where there is that life and death environment, whatever idea I might have had about military people has been completely blown apart by having these really lovely former Marines at my dinner table.
Right. Yeah. At the same time, these meditation and mindfulness and these types of practices are so valuable for those who didn't have that as a practice, while they were in service, because they do take on all that intense guilt and stress from combat, and the combat stress triggers pre-existing trauma-based stress, and so that's why the vets are having such a struggle.
Yeah.
That's good for you. We have a foundation that works with veterans called the Courage Foundation, and we offer a year-long program we call the VIP program, Veteran Integration Program, where we take them through a 3-day retreat where we teach them, the skills that we call unbeatable mind, but they're similar, right? Breath practices, mindfulness.
That's great work.
Movement, right? And then we put them into a small team, so they have that team accountability. Each team has a certified coach, and they have a year-long process of reintegration. Very effective, as you can imagine.
I bet. It's great.
So what other big takeaways from your book, Finding Clarity, would you like listeners to kind of like take home with?
Yeah, I think to face directly and do the work and aspire to be really good at creating a workplace and organization that is good at measuring people's performance. I like the word alignment has become, in fact, if I were to do it again, I might change accountability to, accountability has a little bit of harshness to it, holding people. It's more like alignment. There's a subchapter called The Four Most Important Words, and it's how are we doing? And it's amazing.
Or if you're in upstate New York, it's 3 words. How are we doing?
Yeah, that'll work. But it's about asking, checking in. And this is like, I tell the story of my grown daughter, of how, there was some misunderstanding and some tension that we were working through, and to be able to go on a walk and say, how are we doing? How you feeling about things? And this is so essential in our working relationships. And it's easy to say and hard to do, right? Because you have to be able to ask that question with a body and a mind that is trustworthy, right? Because it can be dangerous to answer
and if you're not trustworthy, you won't get an answer.
You won't get a real answer, right?
Yeah,
right. But so the how are we doing practice is, how can we create a relationship? How can we create an environment where we could actually have that conversation, where you could tell me about things that you're unhappy about, or things that are bothering you, or things I'm doing that bug you. Yeah, I used to ask that question regularly to people who worked for me. Tell me how I bug you. Come on, let's
I like that.
talk about it.
How am I bugging you?
And
I'm going to borrow that.
I'll tell you how you bug me.
That's great. No, I think it's a powerful practice. I try to do that. I actually, reminding me, we should all do that more often, just to check in with our team and see how we doing. How things land. How am I showing up for you?
The Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh suggests in marriages that we ask the question, how can I love you better?
I love that. That's a great place to transition. So the book Finding Clarity, is it primarily for business leaders, or is it a broader audience you're attending?
It's really for a broader audience. It's, in a way, it was written for business leaders, but in some way, we all work. We're all either leading or on teams or working with leaders, and essentially, it's about the human practice of not avoiding difficulty and getting better at working with difficult situations.
Right. Did you read the audiobook yourself?
I didn't, but it was read really well by a professional.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Outstanding. Well, Marc, this has been an amazing conversation. It really, really enjoyable. I know everyone's going to really appreciate it. Very insightful. So thank you so much for your time and for the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you do, Mark.
Appreciate that.